So we're going to get started this week with kind of where we picked up last week. And what we want to do is we want to take this idea of equations and fractions and combine them together. So what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to solve some different word problems. And these word problems are going to involve rational coefficients. And when we mean rational coefficients, we're just saying they're going to have fractions in them. So all of the different skills that we had covered, specifically multiplying and dividing fractions, are going to be important with these problems we're going to cover. So on your screen, you'll see an example of a problem. And it says an architect needs to make a scale drawing of a home. The width, W, of the home in the drawing in inches is given by the equation 7/8 W equals 6. What is the width of the home in the scale drawing? So what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to solve this equation. In a moment, I'm going to post the answer to you. Try solving the equation now. Okay, hopefully you were able to come up with a pretty good solution. And what I would like you to do is I'd like you to follow along as I explain. So because 7/8 is being multiplied by W, we need to remove that. So because the goal of an equation is to get the W by itself. So what we want to do is we want to divide by 7/8. Now, we should know that we can't divide by a fraction. Well, we technically can, but it's very complex. So what we do is we say that we are going to multiply by the reciprocal. So if you notice, we still have the 6, but instead of 6 divided by 7/8, we're saying 6 over 1 times 8 over 7. This is the keep, change, flip that we had practiced earlier. So when we do that, we'll notice that we have to multiply 6 times 8, and then we'll multiply 1 times 7. We end up with 48 over 7. Now that's an improper fraction, and we really can't leave our answer in an improper fraction because we need to create a mixed number, or at least simplify, and we end up with W equals 6 6/7 inches. Hopefully you got that one right. If not, check your work against the work you see. So now I'm going to give you just a generic problem. So this doesn't have a word problem to it, but we want to just test our skills. So we have -28 equals 4/5 D. And this one might seem a little perplexing because the D is on the right-hand side, but really it's the same type of a problem. 4/5 is being multiplied by D. We want to get the D by itself, so we need to get rid of the 4/5. Because it's being multiplied, what do you think we should do? Try solving this problem now. Okay, so let's check your work. What we're going to do is we're going to go through this. So we said that we wanted to get the 4/5 out of there. So what's the opposite of multiplication? That's right, division. So we have to divide by 4/5. We're going to divide by 4/5 on both sides to keep our equation balanced. Now, we can't divide by a fraction, so the 4/5 on the right-hand side cancels out and we'll be left with just D. But on the left-hand side, we have -28 over 1 times 5/4, because remember, instead of dividing by 4/5, we're multiplying by the reciprocal. Keep, change, flip. Now you'll notice that this -28 and the 4 can cross simplify. We can take a factor of 4 out of both of those, and the -28 is going to become a -7. The 4 is going to become a 1. So -7 times 5 is -35, and 1 times 1 is 1, so our answer is just -35. Hopefully you found that you had the same answer as well. If not, go back and check for any errors. So here's a word problem for you. At a local shelter, 36 people volunteered to help prepare meals for disaster victims. If this represented 9/16 of the volunteers at the shelter, write and solve an equation to determine how many volunteers helped at the local shelter. So let's start by identifying a few things. First of all, we're going to let V equal the total number of volunteers because that's actually what we're trying to find. So our variable represents our answer. Now, we need to come up with an equation. So I want you to come up with your equation. Okay. Hopefully, you were able to come up with the same equation as me. I came up with 9/16 times V equals 36 because we said 9/16 of the volunteers. And this of tells me that we're going to take the 9/16 times the number of volunteers, which is V. And that represented 36 people, so it equals 36. Now, what I'm going to ask you to do is to go ahead and solve this equation, and then we'll check our answer. Okay. So because we were multiplying by 9/16, we're going to divide by 9/16. And in dividing by 9/16, we realize that we can't divide by a fraction, so we're going to multiply by its reciprocal. So V is going to equal 36 over 1, which represents 36, times the reciprocal of 9/16, which is 16 over 9. Now, 36 and 9 can cross simplify again, and we should end up with a 4 and a 1. Well, 4 times 16 is 64, and 1 times 1 is 1, so our answer would be 64, which would represent the total number of volunteers at the shelter. Again, if you made any mistakes, double check. See if it was a calculation error, or did you remember to do the reciprocal? All right, so another problem. We have Brent, and he is on a bike. So the speed, S, that Brent can ride his bike if he rides 3/5 of an hour and travels 4 miles is given by the equation. Now, they gave us this equation. So we're letting S equal the total speed, and we already have the equation that 4 miles is equal to 3/5 of his speed, right? 3/5 times the speed. So what I'd like you to do is go ahead and solve this problem. All right. Hopefully you were able to figure out how fast Brent was going. In order to do that, you should have divided by 3/5 on both sides, and once again recognize that we really can't divide by 3/5, so we're going to multiply by the reciprocal. So 4 over 1 times 5 over 3. Now we cannot cross simplify here, so we're going to have to do some multiplication. 4 times 5 you should have found to be 20, and 1 times 3 was 3. So we ended up with an improper fraction that his total speed was 20 over 3. Now we don't want to leave it as 20 over 3, so we have to turn it into a mixed number. 3 goes into 20 6 times with 2/3 left over. So that means Brent traveled 6 2/3 miles per hour.